In recent years, I've had the honor of reviewing games that I loved growing up. This trend of remastered releases might feel worn out to some, but I genuinely enjoy the opportunity to share early gaming experiences with new players. SaGa Frontier 2 was one of those defining childhood games that showed me how creative and unique JRPGs can be. Before this, I never thought about combat depth or cared much about a supporting cast's history. To me, SaGa Frontier really stands out, as it resembles more of the Legend of Mana than any other Saga title, probably because it was developed alongside it. Anyway, that level of accessibility in a franchise known for not being approachable may have affected general player curiosity. And to that, I say, yes, SaGa Frontier 2 can be cryptic, but compared to the rest in the series, it's a walk in the park. If 11-year-old Azario can get through it without a guide, you probably can too. Of all the SaGa Remastered so far, I'm glad Square Enix waited for this one. They figured out how to modernize these games without stripping away the quirks that give them identity. SaGa Frontier 2 Remaster retains what makes the original work while improving the experience in subtle ways. And while the added quality of life features are helpful, honestly, I'm just happy the pre-rendered backgrounds and character designs still shine in this modern release. Let's get some general gameplay structures out of the way. This remastered includes parameter inheritance, which rewards players who grind with early characters, like Gustav or Will, by letting you carry over their weapon or magic levels to later characters. This made it easier to unlock custom tools and gives returning players a reason to max out certain stats in advance. It kinda makes the entire experience feel more freeform than usual. For new players, this might come off as overwhelming, but trust me, this is the most forgiving way to play the game. SaGa Frontier 2 Remastered starts by letting players choose between the classic version or an updated mode that includes new events and party members. I chose the updated route this time given that I've played the original too many times to count, and found that the additional scenes add context to a few character routes that I wasn't previously aware of. Hey, you won't hear me complain about being able to play as Calvin and some of these other characters through brand new scenarios. The changes don't interrupt the flow, and the new characters feel like a natural fit when in combat. If you're a returning player, you might notice the difference in these scenes, but it all plays out in ways that's meant to be there. Combat still very much delivers. It's turn-based, but SaGa's battle system has always had a rhythm to it where every decision feels like part of a larger strategy. Maybe that's just because you're constantly managing LP, WP, and SP more than your HP, but every move comes with some hesitation about how to approach the next turn. There's never an immediate danger, but exhausting your WP early on will leave you vulnerable to any potential late-stage bosses. The rhythm of combat remains intact, and now there are battle speed settings that speed things up quite a bit. Even as a kid, I found these battles to be a little slow, but thankfully in the options menu, you can even set the field and battle settings independently along with other system options, adding a nice suite of ways to customize the gameplay options that you use. In each room you get an autosave, and you can quick save at any time, and along with being able to restart the battles that you game over in, this is all much more approachable than the original release. The game doesn't explain anything though, and some systems are practically hidden unless you look for them. For example, unlocking new arts is mostly done through the duel system where you can fight enemies with one character. While you can still learn new techs from normal battles, you can force new moves by learning them in solo fights. I can't stress this enough though, duels are where the magic happens. Once a character glimmers in art, everyone can use it. Characters like Gustav, Kelvin, and Cordelia are key to unlocking many of these powerful skills early on. Without taking advantage of this, you might find yourself severely underpowered in the mid to late game. Moving on, the UI has also been updated in a few intuitive ways. Menus are much easier to navigate, especially equipment and character management, and the timeline of events clearly shows which scenarios that you're selecting. This still leans heavily on player curiosity, but it's less cumbersome to navigate its story. I remember not really following when events took place when I first played it, but the remastered version displays everything nicely on the side of the screen of the overview map. Set in the region of Sandel, players can choose the order in which they play these events. However, depending on that order, some events or items might be locked out of your run. For example, playing scenarios out of sequence might make you miss things like Gustav and the Pirates, or lose access to certain diggers. Also, there's some specific chapters containing rare drops or farming opportunities that won't be available later in the game. If you're going in without a guide, which I highly recommend, just know that you're gambling with progression as you choose events. That ambiguity, though, is part of the package. Progression isn't always clear, and sometimes you'll feel lost about what to do next. Thankfully, this game is pretty forgiving in that it locks you from progressing too far without the necessary items that you need. Plus, the improved interface makes exploration smoother by clearly showing you where you can and can't go. I should note that interactable items like chests and dungeons stood out a little more in the old PS1 pre-rendered graphics. While now they look great, I can't really see them blended in with the background. But this might just be a me thing. Anyway, another thing players often overlook is how enemy difficulty scales. Like other series entries, it's a bit confusing. This entry is mostly tied to which scenarios you've completed, so if you run ahead too far in the timeline, the game will scale to that challenge. For example, the desert area from Will's story is great for sparking arts early on, but becomes a nightmare later on if you decide to play it out of order. I do suggest using the early windows to improve characters, especially since you can farm chips and crowns now more effectively, thanks to the remaster's inclusion of the Dig Dig Digger minigame, which I'll touch on later. I do need to remember that I've played this game and gone through the growing pains of figuring out progression and combat nuances. I'm not saying you won't be confused, but there's a nice balance of quality of life features that make this release more manageable than other entries in the series, at least in terms of conveying what your current mission is. I prefer this approach to ones that over-explain themselves. This game trusts players to piece together their entire history of these characters. And for me, the dual narrative of SaGa Frontier 2 remains one of the boldest storytelling choices of the PS1 era. It's messy and fragmented, but it resonates more because of that. Gustav and Will's intersecting arcs still carry emotional weight, and that's conveyed across each scene. The remastered enhances the original strengths. The watercolor backgrounds finally get to stand out on modern displays, revealing texture and colors that were easy to miss before. Character sprites look amazing, and even NPCs have received visual upgrades when they appear in new scenes or join your party. I did notice some smoothing on background characters, but that's just par for the course for remastered releases like this. I do believe how Square Enix approached preserving this release is among their best work yet, changing enough not to overshadow the complexities and nuances of the original. But I can't go on without mentioning Masashi Hamauzu's soundtrack, which still lands perfectly. No rearrangements, just a clean mix and a new sound test menu. That's all that's needed. These tracks live rent-free in my brain, and I'm excited for them to move into yours. As I mentioned before, surprisingly this remastered even digs into the obscure content, that being the Pocket Station exclusive minigame Dig Dig Digger, and it's now playable. The original version never left Japan, so its inclusion here feels like a thoughtful bonus. You randomly be able to find diggers on the ground of some scenarios, and send them on timed quests for low-tier tools to chip and convert into crowns. The restraint shown in SaGa Frontier 2 Remastered speaks volumes. Square Enix knew what to preserve with this release. The visuals are updated without losing their charm, and the additions make it easier to play without compromising the identity. SaGa Frontier 2 Remastered let me relive the adventure that I had as a kid. You know, trying to figure out which sword techs would combine to pull off the slice and dice attack during a solo battle. It's an imaginative and ambitious game that will have anyone confused for the first few hours. But if you give yourself time in this world, you'll likely love it as much as I do. It's a great starting point for anyone curious about the series. And yes, in this release, you can even fight random enemies without completely destroying your endgame difficulty. If you're a fan of JRPGs, and were wondering if SaGa Frontier 2 Remastered is a must-play, then I can easily say with confidence, yes, play this game whenever you get the chance. Noisy Pixel is giving SaGa Frontier 2 Remastered a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.